Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome global leadership and resilient expert, founder, keynote speaker, Alison Bromage. So, welcome, Alison.
Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
So, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you share with us how your career started?
So, as far as for doing resilience and leadership, is I actually ended up joining the army of all things, British Army, back when I was age 17. Uh,
Amazing. Wow.
I know that was a slightly unexpected day at school, was being recruited from school straight into the army. And so went and had a year in the army. It's like a gap year. They call it a short service limited commission. So that gives you a chance to look at the army and the army a chance to look at you. Then went back to university and then essentially went back to full-time regular service then back in 1999, which still feels like yesterday to me, but I'm sure that for some
Yes.
listeners that'll seem recent and for some it will probably seem a
A
gazillion
million
years
miles
away.
away.
Yes. So it's been really, I guess I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most phenomenal leaders in the world and also some of the most atrocious.
Yes, I'm
And
sure.
over, yeah, so over time you realize actually the pivotal point that a leader can have in both how a team runs, how a business runs, how a unit runs. And for better or for worse, as I was leaving the army, one of the factors for me leaving the army was I just worked for some amazing teams and then came across some really, really atrocious leaders. And I just thought, I never, ever, ever want someone else to ever have to work in this environment.
No.
It was toxic, it was exhausting, it was very corrosive to one's own self-esteem and one's own self-confidence. And I thought, I've just come from feeling $1 million in my previous unit. What on earth has happened here? So I thought, right, next step is set up my own resilience and leadership practice. And then hopefully we can provide a mechanism for more fantastic leaders and help give a way out for those who aren't a natural leader and know that they want to do something about it. So,
Yes.
and that's kind of how we've got to where we are now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, as a resilient and leadership specialist, you were deployed across the globe with the British Army for over 17 years. So, do you believe that this taught you invaluable leadership skills? And when did you decide to transition into what you are doing now? And was this an organic experience for you?
So I've got to be honest, I feel like often when I walk down the road in the UK, I just feel hugely privileged that
Yes.
when I look at different faces, not always, but I'd say 95 to 99% of the time I can usually guess where they come from.
Wow,
And
that's
so
amazing.
when you can say to somebody, oh, where do you come from? And I've actually learned probably, a little bit like the Australia, New Zealand pieces, never get it wrong. Or Canada and America, never get it wrong. So,
Yes.
so rather than saying, are you Somali or are you Kenyan or are you South African? I'll often just say, oh, where are you from? Just to double check my own kind of recognition skills, so to speak. And
Yes.
then you can usually have a lovely conversation with someone about having visited their nation of origin, and to be able to say thank you so much for being here in the UK, because I haven't lived in the UK for most of my adult life. So
Yes.
ironically, I feel almost like I am
Global
some
citizen?
yes, a global citizen and also slightly like an alien in my own land. So
Yes.
my favorite place often in London is actually inside an Uber, because then you can get to chat to everyone about what's going on in Eritrea, what's going on in Ethiopia, what's going on in Pakistan, what's going on in all these different amazing parts of the globe that you've had exposure to. You've seen the different leadership styles, good and bad. You've seen the different way people live. And really, to be a global leader now, you need that global context. So I do feel
Absolutely.
really privileged that I've had that, whether it's been through war fighting, peacekeeping, however the mechanism has been, that I've been to places that most wouldn't go to because they're not peaceful, as in
Yes.
for the general visitor. I've always found people have been kind, respectful, And it gives you faith that the background of humanity is actually very civil. When we want to
Yes,
be kind, we really can be. And I think if you're starting with that premise as a leader, you're already starting with an inclusive aspect. You're already starting with the idea of, I'm looking for skills, I'm looking for cultural fit. And when I say cultural fit, I mean benevolence, kindness, intellectually curious. To me, those are cultural aspects of a person, of what interests you, what's going to bring out the best in you. And once you have those values and standards kind of as a bit of as a backbone, then you can build a team around that. And it doesn't matter what shape, size, color, variety of human being you are, or, you know, your place of, you know, blood origin, if that's a if that's a way
yes.
of describing, you know. And so I think from a leadership perspective, I feel very, very lucky to have had that exposure, because it means I actually don't see many of the problems as problems. I see them as opportunities.
Absolutely.
Now.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about leadership or the lack of leadership from a global and entrepreneurial and corporate perspective. And what do you believe needs to change the current narrative?
So for me, I think the fascinating, when I left the army, which was back in 2016, there'd just been a huge strategic defense review. And so there was lots of change going on. There were amalgamations of different capabilities within the military. There were cuts being made, etc. Not dissimilar to what we're experiencing now post-COVID, with
Yes,
lots of mergers and acquisitions as different companies move together to try and create a more stable and strong base for growth into the future. Others have fallen by the wayside where they didn't have a resilient enough, be that, you know, leadership where they were absolutely exhausted and had enough, or where they
yes,
hadn't put resilient financial structures in place, where the actual business model wasn't strong enough. So I think there's a real interesting piece of, sometimes a recession and challenge can actually sort out the wheat from the chaff. It means
absolutely.
those who are really
Yeah,
strong will meet others around them who are really strong and then move forward.
yes.
And to go into COVID in early 2020 sounds awful. I was really excited. I was like, wow, I'm now in a
Mm,
room I can understand. This is lockdown. This is an austere and hostile environment. This is an arena that's being filled with fear. And it's not dissimilar to walking into a new operational environment where we don't know anybody, we don't know what's going to happen. We're trying to create a plan in uncertain circumstances, and
yes,
you keep the morale of everyone going. So actually, I loved being able to support leaders during that time and take them from fear to seeing this as an opportunity. Because where there is fear, there's also adrenaline. And
yes,
when you can turn adrenaline into curiosity, you can help people see opportunity. So nearly all
absolutely.
the businesses we worked with during COVID grew. The teams did pretty well because they actually used it a little bit like, you know, when you have a diamond, it's built under pressure. You know, a diamond
Yes,
grows under pressure under the ground.
yes,
And the same with us. If we view it as an opportunity, there's a real sweet spot of pressure where we grow. You
yes,
don't grow in soft conditions. You grow where it's like beautiful wine is where it's dry. You know, it's
yes,
ironically, it's that soil condition that makes a really great wine is often quite stressed, but it's finding a happy medium where it's not where you break, but you have just enough adrenaline to help you be on that edge of creativity, of thriving, of flow, but you're also managing your team, your energy levels, your expectations, your workload, so that it's a little bit like riding a wave, maybe. You're trying to ride the edge of the wave all the time. So you're not crashing to the bottom, being
mm,
smashed to the bottom of the bed, but similarly, you're not in the doldrums where you're just sat there on your surfboard, not going anywhere. So
absolutely.
your question of what would I say I would really want to see as a change? Banish the fear. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I think that's what this whole premise of the pandemic was driven on pure
Oh,
fear.
oh my goodness, the media has so much to be responsible
Oh,
for.
they're atrocious. I mean,
So I'd say, what can we do ourselves? What, you know, just like food, we are what we eat. We are
yes,
also what we absorb. So it's
yes,
looking at what are we absorbing? What are the inputs that we are having? and just doing a sanity check of, are they feeding you? Are they actually enabling you to grow? Are they supporting your growth? Or
Yes.
are they actually filling you with fear, telling you that nothing's possible, and deriding everybody? And as we all know, when we receive too much critique for too long, it batters us. And then your
100%.
creative mechanism stops. It
Yeah.
reduces. You start to shrink. So if you've got shrinking humans, you've got shrinking productivity, then you've got shrinking business, then you have a shrinking economy. That's at national, that is at local, regional, national, international level. And then you get into the pickle we're in at the moment, where people are at 6s and 7s with themselves of, what do I really believe? Who can I
Yeah.
trust? What's the way forward? And it all, for me, comes from the root of fear. So if
Yeah.
you can turn fear into curiosity, both for
Mm.
ourselves, for what we expect of our leaders, and for leaders themselves to go, okay, actually, what's the opportunity for this?
Mm.
Then I think we can start creating positive momentum. An example I would give at the moment is, I lived in Germany for several times and several years at each time, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved living in Germany. And they already had in the big cities, and this is back in 2007, 2008. I was there again in 2011, 2012, 2013 time. So a while ago, they were already making fun pictures and initials of the businesses out of the lights on the skyscrapers to
Wow.
reduce the amount of electricity being used, but to make sure that the impact of this is where this is where company X works, was still being received. So you might put a big
Yes.
X in front of the building, for example, but you weren't just wasting energy for the sake of leaving all the lights on. And
No.
people would, have things like simple stuff like bulk rubbish, which would be every few weeks. You'd put all of your domestic appliances, if you had a spare bed, if somebody had a spare sofa, whatever it was, everything went onto the street on a specific day. So it's still very organized. And then if you were going, for example, I moved house during one of these periods, I furnished the entire house from bulk rubbish. I didn't have to buy a single solitary item. No cutlery, nothing for the kitchen, literally nothing, no bedding, no microwave, no appliances. I filled the entire house with everybody else's cast-offs. And I
Wow.
was only there for 2 years, so it all lasted. And then I sanded it onto my successor. So
Amazing.
just real simple things, but it meant you were creative. It meant you were being innovative.
Yes.
And then,
And
just
thinking differently.
yes, exactly that. So even when you go
Mm.
into the workplace, it'd be right, where are the recycling bins? This is 10 years ago. The boys, I had a team of 85 then. They all looked at me like I'd come out of some weird part of the universe that wasn't their planet. And let alone that it became a weekly task for whichever the duty individual was to actually then take the recycling to the recycling centre. But, now we see that far more intrinsically integrated into how some businesses work. But I'm still now going into places like, well, I won't name the names, but I've been into 3 different supposedly sustainable fast food restaurants in London here, recycling. So they're
Yeah.
making everything out of the paper package. They're making everything out of their bamboo, this and their, recycled plastic. But actually, in the restaurant themselves, there is nowhere to recycle. And they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming through these multi-branched, multinational
Wow.
organizations. And I'm thinking, you've just missed the final step. You've done
Yeah.
the sustainably sourced materials. You've gone for the healthy eating. You've gone for the paper package to reduce plastic, but then you're not recycling it at the end. And I'm just
Yeah.
going, weird. It's like you've missed the final hoop. So I'd say ban the fear. Let's turn
Yes.
fear into curiosity and finish the loop. If you start doing a good thing, pat yourself on the back for every little good thing you do. But tomorrow, let's see what else can I add to that. So my own piece is, how can I use less today than I use tomorrow? And it's
Yes.
iterative. Every little helps. Recycling your clothing, saying thank you when somebody gives a gift, whether you want it or you don't want it. Then and just looking at, what am I throwing away? What can I reuse? What can I share in the community? Nothing goes wasted out of our house. Literally everything goes on Gumtree. And the same with business. How can they develop software that's more efficient? How do they develop ways in which they can upgrade, the systems within a specific set box, for example, for TVs, where it doesn't involve someone going to your house that then has a carbon footprint? How
Yes.
can you turn down by 1 degree in the office? Putting jumpers on, not turning up the heating.
Yes.
The real simple things that as an aggregate, if we were all to do, makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
I love the irony. I went in to see a CEO. So I do coaching for mainly CEOs, C-suite and boards now, because I can then scale the impact, not because coaching lower down isn't really, really important, and it is. And I have an amazing stable of coaches that we lean on to provide the broader programs into middle management and group programs. But the bit, I guess, because of that geopolitical exposure for the 20 years in the army, means I can understand why, UAE is involved in the Horn of Africa, and where are the oil fields, and why are people buying up different resources, and who has access to this mining area, or, that port system, or whatever it is. So when we're talking through different options, I hopefully bring that as well to the leadership coaching, is encouraging them to future-proof themselves and their business of where are we going? What are the big plans do? How can we reinforce that? How can we utilize that? And literally as simple as listening to a discussion of Obama going into the White House years ago, where he was quite famous, I think, for reducing the West Wing by 1 degree. And then there were all these stats of what energy he'd saved. And I went in to go and discuss the sustainability policy for this amazing CEO we'd been working with for about 18 months. As he proudly told me, he was just going to turn up the heating so it wasn't cold. And I said, no. And he was there in a shirt in October, November time. I said, this is last winter. I said, no, go and put a jumper on. I said, don't turn up the heating. You've got hundreds of people in this building, and it's multi-layered building. It's a huge big office in central London. I said, your choice has a huge knock-on impact. And you're here talking about encouraging using public transport, having electric cars in people's fleets. And I'm like, start at home.
Yeah, exactly.
What you can do. Look at your own light bulbs. Look at how how much heating you having on. Can you put two duvets on rather than one? These sound so simplistic, but literally somebody else comes and stays in my house, the bills are double as when I'm here.
Wow.
And if I just imagine when I go to the Mambas, I know we'll get to that in a little bit about conservation, but moving everything that the units do towards sustainable sources, moving the food towards being organic sources, and just eating less, not having sugary products that are going to put your team onto an emotional roller coaster all day.
Yes.
Going to restaurants where they have fresh options rather than just processed food that affects people's mind. So if you've got this ingestion of negativity from the general media status, and I don't mean just press, I mean just in general, be it social media, the TV, films, all of that part, if your brain isn't then firing on all cylinders because you're also feeding it rubbish,
yes,
you're compounding the problem. So I'd also just encourage, let's move towards providing a more healthy environment for all of us. Less booze, more sustainable items in our eating environment. Just simple stuff like that. And I guess, again, I've spent 20 years in high pressure, very, very stressful environments, and I mainly lived on sugar. I'm now paying for that. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No,
but
exactly.
Earlier, and it starts with us as leaders. We're helping provide that cultural impetus into the team. So there we are. That's a few parts, but I know you've got lots of questions. So
So what would you say your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career, and what would you say have been your biggest highlights? So the contrast between the two, and I'm sure you probably had multiple, but what really stands out for you in both the lessons and in your career highlights?
So my biggest lesson learned, ironically, I am relearning now. I'm in civilian life doing civilian coaching. So when you're in the army, you kind of have an idea that you are already in a location because they need your help. So you are, I would hope, walking in with benevolent intent. So the idea that you want to create good because you're going to try and create peace, or you're trying to provide a stable environment for others to create peace.
Yes.
Or there's something, a resource that people are fighting over, so you're trying to provide some breathing space for others to negotiate. So I guess my lesson has always been, be kind. Try and understand what is going on in somebody else's mind before you jump to conclusions. And that is absolutely reaffirmed to me regularly when dealing with corporate and private business, where
Yes.
you might have very different opinions, different backgrounds, different exposures. And then you can find it can be as simple as the difference of where people have been reading their inputs, the difference of the exposure they've had as a young person, different country that they may have grown up with, the different communication style they might have that may appear
Yes.
very abrupt, even though what the words they're saying are not bad, but the
No.
pitch and tone means the delivery can be very abrupt to
Yes.
me in the way in which I'm expecting to receive communication. So I have to stop sometimes and go, what was the intent? What did they mean? And often I will then say, can you just talk me through what would you really like me to do? What's the outcome you'd like? So I leave an open question where
Yes.
it kind of takes the fire out of somebody if they're a bit agitated, because you're asking, can you just talk me through what would you like? What's the outcome you'd like? What would you really like to achieve so I can help support you with that? You've showed that you're supportive to them, even if you're not agreeing with them, because you're needing to explain and articulate more from their point of view what the outcome is. And once you've got clarity on someone else's outcome and intent, then you can navigate where does that sit in comparison to where you are. Whereas if
Yes.
you jumped in with an assumption, you risk causing conflict much earlier. You risk essentially having an altercation that just wasn't necessary. And that may be because of the difference in pitch and tone, the difference in expectation. And I think my highlight has been someone asking me to work less. So,
Amazing.
so again, my expectation, I went into a very high tempo, very austere environment in Afghanistan, and as running a team of, I can't remember, 55, 60 of us across 5 different locations, very, very high tempo operations, and a lot expected of everybody all the time. So I came in super enthusiastic, going to be there for 9 months, charge, 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 charge. A little bit like when all of us take on a new role, we surge in, what do you want to achieve? Make sure you make your mark, all of that stuff. And the boss calls me in a few weeks into my role and goes, Alice, how do you think are you doing? And I go, oh, I hope pretty well. Hope you're doing a little enthusiastic, little puppy going, yeah, we've been working really hard. I said, I think the team's, firing on all cylinders. And he said, yeah, that's the problem. And I was absolutely shell-shocked. And he said, what are you going to do when we have a hostage crisis? And I was like, we've gone through all the drills, we've gone through all the practice. What are you going to do if we have an emergency where there's an aircraft down? And basically he was asking me, what are you going to do if something else happens? You've already got the team working at 100%. I actually think I probably had the team surging on at 120% because they were all desperately trying to make me happy too, which again comes back to your position of a leader of responsibility for tempo.
Yes.
Making sure you don't overstretch your team because they say yes. It's also your responsibility to help them sometimes say no, not only by not asking them, but actually training them to create sustainable boundaries. What are their working capacity boundaries so that you're not overstretching and breaking them or yourself?
Yeah.
And so that's fascinating where I said, no, Alice, I need the team working at 80%. Now that forced me to review what we were looking at, how we were doing business, how I'd allocated resource. And, the guy was a very good commander for a very good reason. Needless to say, over the period of time that I was working there, we did have several very short notice, completely out of the blue, very significant emergencies, including life and death, having a helicopter go down, losing part of my team, all sorts of different things, which if we'd been stretched at capacity, like an elastic band, could have risked breaking us. But by having that temperance at the start of my tour has really stayed with me for life.
Yeah.
And so it's quite an odd highlight, given the fact that I could probably imagine some of the most beautiful wonders of the world. So I guess I'll say one of the more physical highlight in a second. But as a leadership highlight, that was a real wake-up call and a moment of real significant pivotal change for me, and also how I now coach into the city. And we've had that even with investment banks that we've worked with, One department took that on from
Mm.
COVID, one didn't. The managing director that didn't take it on lost 5 of his team within the next 6 weeks. The managing partner that did take it on has scaled and doubled in size in the same time.
Wow.
In the same business, but 2 different departments. And that regularly comes back and stays with me, where you're actually forcing people to create more sustainable working practices, be
Yes.
efficient in comparison to stretch until they break, then I'll replace, which isn't efficient for anybody.
No.
And I think from a physical highlight would be flying towards Baghdad and seeing where the gardens of Babylon should have been, up the River Tigris, and just going, wow, this is where one of the wonders of the world used to be, and now no more. And then going to Germany and finding the Ishkar Gate, which is still in perfect form, which used to be one of the gates going into one of those amazing old temples, and just seeing the regalness, the regality of those ancient civilizations that often we risk paying so little heed to.
Yeah.
And they are the foundation stones of humanity as we know it now. And so that always encourages me to be humble about what we think we know in comparison to what humanity already has known and knows. And how much do we look back to be able to look forward, rather than just thinking that we're always on the cusp of fresh knowledge? Actually, how much of this needs to be relearned because we've learned it before.
Yes.
We may have.
Amazing. It's an incredible story. Well, thanks for sharing that. So I want to move on to the orcas, and you definitely obviously have a taste for adventure and have done some incredible trips. So I want to talk about your resilience retreats in the Arctic swimming with orcas, which must have been an incredible experience. So swimming with these beautiful creatures must be such a spiritual experience. So can you share with us, or perhaps dispel, some of the myths and fears around orcas? And what are some of the things that you could share with our audience about these very intelligent animals?
So this almost goes back to fear. When you are being trained in the army and even at school, so the Duke of Edinburgh Award is all about stretching us individually.
Yes.
And as we stretch and as we're put under pressure, we go stronger. And essentially, when I was serving, I would be taken, or would take soldiers all over to different parts of the planet. And you can see them bond so quickly when put into a really challenging environment.
Yes.
So when I came home, when I came back to the UK and I found this environment of fear, and I'm going, you have electricity, you have water, you have heat, you've got a home. What are you also fearful of? You realize how many of these fears are actually created within our own mind.
Yes.
So part of developing the resilience retreats was things like flying over, on the way up to Baghdad, seeing these phenomenally beautiful parts of the planet, and knowing that people fight and will do anything for something they believe in, something they feel is beautiful. And taking that back into where are controlled environments that are, relatively speaking, safe. An orca does have big teeth, and it's called a killer whale for a reason if you pick the wrong arena to be in with it.
Yes.
The right people in the right arena to go into the natural habitat of an apex predator where it has control and we don't.
Yes.
It will come towards you if it is curious.
Yes.
They are the most beautiful beings. And
I love orcas.
They are amazing. And the same, hence my lion, because we do the same in South Africa, is going to walk with lions, again, is a hugely empowering experience.
Yeah.
But you have to do it with very well-trained people who know how to navigate the human behavior. And it reminds you that you are human. It reminds you are just another being. We are just another, we're another predator on this planet. And it sounds slightly odd, but when you put somebody into such an environment where it's so vast, it helps shrink us to make us put our own woes, fears, and concerns into perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
So you into this vast ocean, and you put them next to this most phenomenal apex predator that, if it chose to, could cause you a lot of damage.
Yes.
But you're going where it's happy. You're going
Yes.
well fed. You're going where you know that it will welcome you.
Yes.
And that's where we go in Norway. And that specific area has a specific type of an orca population that basically only feeds on herring.
Oh,
So
wow.
not seeing you as a big seal pup going, brilliant, this is lunch.
Yeah.
Which could unfortunately happen in other parts of the planet. It is very well fed. It has beautiful, huge amounts of herring that all come into the fields when we go down. And so that you're not at risk from that perspective. You are at risk of, if you get between, the mummy orca and its baby. So
Oh,
we're
yeah,
very,
yeah. It's like
all of
any
them
animal,
are,
really. Yeah.
yes. So we're
Yeah.
very careful about where you go in. But yes, so like you say, that just experience, very ethereal, spiritual experience of dropping into the water,
Mm.
nothing else around you apart from these phenomenal, beautiful beasts. And just, like I say, it's just wonderful to be allowed to be in the presence of these basically megafauna.
Mm. I would
And
love to do it. I mean, I'm a little bit
join
nervous, but I
us.
would love to do it. I would
Oh,
really
do.
love to do it.
Absolutely. And when we talk about leadership too, is, the reason we're able to go is because we're two lovely French individuals who run the Orca kind of exploration piece up in Norway. It's
Mm.
just because they loved orcas. So they
Mm.
actually came from south of France where they loved driving speedboats and would
Mm.
take people on beautiful yacht cruises.
Mm.
But the husband loved orcas. So they have gone up and studied them, got to know them, worked out the best way to be able to integrate with them. So
Mm.
everything is very, very much on a local scale. You're
Mm.
staying in a local Norwegian village. You're being fed and looked after by the Sami, which is the tribe that basically inhabits the frozen region of the north. So that
Mm.
goes across Finnmark, which is both Norway, Sweden, and Finland, all the way across that top area.
Mm.
They have the right to roam, so to speak, with reindeer. So the whole experience, and then you've got the Northern Lights up there, which again is seeing these phenomenal, the Aurora Borealis, the amazing
Mm.
light show that nature creates, and it reminds you we are just human. We are
Yes.
we are just one population base on this phenomenal planet of all of this amazing piece, and where our little planet is part of a much bigger, universe. And
Mm.
sometimes I think that humility helps remind us where we are and make us more aware of the importance to look after each other, be that
Yes.
in our families, in our teams, in our businesses. That's what leadership is all about, is seeking to protect those that can't protect themselves. And that involves making strong, resilient businesses. That involves stretching ourselves, putting ourselves out of our own comfort zone,
Mm.
so that we can bring these lessons back and support others as they go through challenging times, feeling uncomfortable, finding the curiosity rather than the fear. Those are all skills and aspects that need supporting and developing and working on all the time. And if your
Yes.
leaders put themselves into a tricky position, then they'll know how to support you when you're in a tricky position. And if they're just
Absolutely.
comfy and nice, then probably not somebody I'll be working with.
No.
Not that there's anything wrong with sitting home comfy and nice, but
No.
it's not my arena for helping you grow. There's others that can help for that arena.
Absolutely. So I wanted to actually touch on we as the world have been through probably the most trying time, as you mentioned earlier, as a collective with this pandemic, which has obviously impacted us on multiple levels. So both from a mental health standpoint and changing the business landscape, is this something that you focus on in your work? And how do you see the direction of business, corporations, and entrepreneurs changing? And do you feel that there is enough support regarding mental health and leadership? And is this something that you address in your work? And if so, what are some of the tools and support systems you use? So I
That's a
know
long
that's a
one.
lot, but
Okay. So I think where I'd love to start with answering that question is looking at high performance.
yes.
So the performance of oneself is holistic. So your brain is affected by what we're eating, our own structure, our environment. And so we can't produce well at work, at home, anywhere
Mm.
if we're physically feeling sick, if we're emotionally volatile, and mentally if we're not quite, feeling in a good place.
Yes.
So I think if we almost wind it back to what's going to help somebody achieve really well in the first place, and you
Yes.
almost take yourself back to, which is what I've had to do for myself, hence saying about the sugar, having just been fed sugar for so many years and rubbish food.
Yes.
A number of my peers from different operational tools who are now, celiac, diabetic, etc., because we've pushed our bodies using the stimuli of sugar and caffeine and sleep deprivation and adrenaline to basically try and push and push and push. And I think what was interesting about the pandemic was it took everybody into, ironically, from my perspective, a far more controlled environment. Now, I know that the narrative was that nobody could control anything. This is way out of our control. Whereas actually, ironically, I was looking there going, this is like one large biological experiment.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
You can control what comes into your house and you can control when you go out of your house.
Yeah.
So every door in our home, so I've done lots of nuclear, biological and chemical training, with the army, like you do. That's all part and parcel of warfare. So as
Yes.
far as I was concerned, the first thing I did was work out, where do I keep food? How is it coming into the house? What are the entry points by which viruses and bugs could be coming into our home? And therefore, every doorway had a spray can of sanitizer. So I went and bought, literally before everything was going into lockdown, I went back up to Scotland to my parents because I was in London. I thought, you're all crazy. You're all pretending as if nothing's going on. I'm just going to leave you all to it and I'll come back when you're finished.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think even for me, just living in the country was helped my sanity, to be
Yeah,
honest.
absolutely. So literally, I'd just taken on a new assistant. And bless her, she was from Australia, so she didn't have any real family here. She just got an apartment like 2 days before. And I said, right, I'm going to Scotland tomorrow. Do you want it? This is like 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. I think we went into lockdown on like Tuesday or Wednesday. So this was just beforehand. I looked at Boris Johnson on TV and I thought, you're crazy. You have no idea what you're doing. I'm going home. If my parents are going to die, I want to be there with them.
Yeah.
So for better or for worse, I'm quite straightforward about that kind of stuff.
No,
So,
100%.
so literally in my pajamas and a pair of flip-flops, 10 bags of my office, computers, paperwork, literally poured everything in. And we were on the first train up to Scotland the following day. As bless her, this lady said, yeah, I'll come with you. She was meant to have her own house, all the rest of it. That didn't happen because then everyone else, spread to the four winds and came, went home. So she and I end up cohabitating, bless her, for 3 months. So what I think, yeah, imagine poor 18-year-old stuck with a 45-year-old business owner that you've just met in a very small cottage in North Scotland.
But again, it's another opportunity. It's like you say, it's how you look at it, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah, what a learning experience for us both, and it was brilliant. So
yeah.
And also just a time we doubled the business in size. That's I'm here to support leaders and in their growth, and what a time that you need strong leadership. So
Absolutely.
when there is uncertainty, one of the reasons that you have, one of the roles of a leader is to create certainty from uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Creating certainty from uncertainty takes skill. And if what I can offer in is 20 years worth of spending my entire life creating certainty from uncertainty, then if I can offer a little bit of that back, that's a bonus. So with all the teams we're working with, they helped settle the team down, reassure them, listen to their concerns, what were their fears, work out what was an actual tangible physical fear and what was more an emotional response to something being they haven't experienced before. So very much that empathetic leadership. So helping individuals look holistically. So some of the companies sent food parcels, for example, all fresh fruit, all fresh things, nothing packaged, all fresh. So you're trying to ensure that those families, wherever they are in the planet, and that particular business is spread over 5 different nations, finding ways to make sure that there was still fresh produce able to go to those families now they were in lockdown, making sure that the IT systems worked well so they could reduce some of the friction of electronics, which now, through 2.5 years later, we all take as given that everyone knows how to use Zoom, etc., etc. So, which that wasn't the case when you go from being in an office one day to not being
Mm.
in an office the next.
No,
It's like,
absolutely.
so helping people change management, gentle nudging towards a scenario where you're just giving people space,
Mm.
grace to go through the change. You've got families you now need to educate. Okay, let's work out across the teams when are times that you are all available that is going to work for the family too. So this integration, which ironically in the military you've had to do because the
Yes.
families are traveling the world with you, the integration of, the old term of happy wife, happy life. Okay, well,
Yes.
that's just as important whether you have a wife, you have a husband, or you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Is, if you haven't sorted your home life out, you will not produce the goods at work. You are only one human. You have to develop yourself to have strong boundaries, clarity about what helps you achieve, and clarity about what then enables you to provide a great service to your customer and to the person who is your employer. Or if you are that business owner, how do you create that environment for everyone else? So where do I see the move being is far more acknowledgement of the strength and power of empathetic leadership.
Absolutely.
The dictatorial style, you can still have a benevolent dictator, but you have to be seriously careful with that because that will only last so long.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing this even now
Yeah,
with just the
absolutely.
fall of
And
leaderships, the tyrannical behavior, the
crazy, crazy,
narcissism,
crazy.
the list
Absolutely.
goes
And
on.
exactly. And what's wonderful about that is it's given people a voice to say no more.
Yeah.
So it's both on one hand, when we're talking about fear versus encouragement, it's encouraged leaders to see that actually it is okay. You're being given permission. It is okay to move towards being a stronger, empathetic leader. The fact that when you are building a high trust environment with your client base, with your team, that they can trust you. They can see you're going through the same challenges as they are. A biological influencing factor is a massive evener when you're going, COVID is going to affect you, or the flu is going to affect you, or whatever it is that comes up next is going to affect you wherever you are in the planet, unless you are taking good care of yourself.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that came out, for example, was we also had Black Lives Matter, obviously in the middle of COVID. And for another of the teams, they had some of the leadership in America out rioting on the streets, whilst others were at a Trump rally.
Yeah.
And the
Which turned
guys,
out to be a complete scam.
well, either way of one's political view, there is the leader in the UK going, I've got these multiple different nationalities, different cultures, all responding to this in a different way. How do I ensure that I do my best by them? When you've got all these different political views, even within the business. And it all came back to safe and secure environment to enable to them to serve the business.
Yeah.
So I said, well, how do you ensure that they are going to be safe tonight? Will they come home? So as a leader, he was able to go back and go, my number one concern is your actual physical well-being. Please, can you assure me that you are not doing anything that puts your own well-being at risk? It's hard to say if you're out on a street in the middle of a riot. It's also hard to say if you're in the middle of a big rally, whatever your political views are, when COVID is spiking. So we took it away from the political domain of whether you did or didn't agree with what somebody was doing and brought it back into, you are a paid employee, which means you need to turn up for work. Are you going to be physically able to with the activities you're doing? Of course, the answer to both was no.
No. Plain and simple. But also to add to that, if I may ask, do you
Of
also
course.
think in a way that this has created more critical thinking? Because I think that people have been so passive for so long, even when it comes to branding and marketing and people telling you what's good for you and all of this. And I almost think that this pandemic has forced people to become far more critical in terms of thinking. I don't know if
I
you have the
really
same.
hope so.
Yeah.
I really, really hope so, because again, that is part of the gift of both being a great follower and being a great leader. You have to be intellectually curious. Part of being a great human being is being intellectually curious. What's going to keep our mind sparking as we grow, older, God willing, wiser, into our dotage? You see those who just are passive, and you see those who are intellectually curious. What you wire together fires together. The more you're firing your brain to be curious, to see what's behind each different thing. But what I would caveat that with is, just as like when we started our conversation, is where are your inputs coming from? Because it's also very hard to work out when there's so many different feeds. I know I sometimes get overwhelmed and just go, which one do I start to believe? And it takes quite a lot of energy to break it down into its constituent parts.
Yes.
Almost like a kind of sync matrix, and go, right, this piece of information's come from here. This piece of information is telling me this. This piece of information is telling me that. This has come from this source, that source, the other source. So yes, the critical thinking, I really hope has been awakened in many of us, but hopefully not with too much of the skepticism, where we've also been encouraged to doubt science, doubt each other, doing a lot of spin, and being very open to social media algorithms.
Yes.
And I mean, I just look at my own family, and we have everything from far left to far right within our family spectrum. Everything in the play.
Yeah.
Gatherings are always entertaining. Literally, it's hysterical. Every
I
color
mean,
in the rainbow. And I am aware that the feed I get from because I know my own family and friend base very much, where something is decided it's just going to show me X people and X feed. And I actively have to go and go, but what's cousin X doing?
yes.
What's cousin Y doing? Because I know they have a different political view to me. I know that they have a different thought process. So I actively seek out a viewpoint that doesn't naturally match my own. But it's because of that awareness that I'm going, hang on, crazy machine. Why are you just filtering all the things that I'm immediately going to like and agree with? So I think there's, yes, awakening that curiosity, brilliant, but is also, with that curiosity, just having a ready mind's eye of, what am I now being fed? I show, for example, interest in going to a women's networking event. And at some stage, I must have clicked yes on cookies. Suddenly, last Friday, I had half a dozen adverts. It's payday. It's your payday treat day. And it wanted me to buy makeup. The last time I bought makeup was, well, pre-pandemic, fun enough.
You and me both.
Yeah, I was like, what on earth just happened here?
Yeah.
Somebody's gone into the algorithms, checked that I'm female, looked at my age group, looked at the day of the month, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, delete, delete, delete. And I'm still interested in going to the network event, but I was like, you cheeky monkeys, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Let's watch with
So
what
it's too much control with these corporations, and I think people need to really take control of their own.
Well, and so they will, but
situation.
we do already have control about what we absorb.
Yeah.
You still have control of your delete button. You have control of the unsubscribe. And at the end of the day, that's exactly what I did. I put in the particular company's name, and I got all the emails out that I found had actually been scurrying away in my inbox for the last 2 years, because I guess I've just ignored them rather than now being bothered by them. Just press delete and unsubscribe. So you're right. I mean, on one hand, this is very clever because it enables people to, like you and I, finding each other on LinkedIn. It enables people to link up where they might have areas of interest. So I wouldn't say that the technology is bad in itself, but it's like
how it's been used. I think that's more the point.
And that we take control, going, okay, actually, my inbox is my inbox. I am going to press delete. I am going to press unsubscribe. I'm going to check which cookies. And when Mr. X publication, which actually in the UK there is one, which is meant to be a very high quality, good publication, when I'm thinking, you are the only thing I've clicked yes to cookies for last week, you're not going to have my readership again.
No.
So we can also be a conscientious consumer.
Absolutely.
And I really, really encourage that. Is leadership starts from within. Leadership starts at home.
Yes.
What are we buying? Who are we following? Who are we listening to? And what actions are we taking? So what actions are we taking with our own little money, our own little activities? Which charities are we supporting? Which activities are we supporting? what language are we using? Who are we trying to look after in our communities? You know, if you have something spare in the fridge, do you throw it away or do you take it to the homeless person down the road? Now, health and safety, is it okay? Will they get food poisoning? The choice is still theirs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I tried taking a loaf of bread somebody had left me in my house after an Airbnb visit years ago. I thought, right, I'll just take it down the road. There's somebody I know that sleeps rough down the road. I don't eat bread, so there we go. That's easy. It took me another 2 miles of walking to find someone who'd actually accept it.
Wow.
No, I don't know where it's come from. I'm not eating that. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but that's your choice. So I kept on walking to the meeting I was going to, and I was literally in Westminster before finding the next person went, oh, yes, please. And I thought, well, it's zipped, it's not open, nothing. But our choice is our choice. So it's maybe re-empowering ourselves.
Yes, agreed.
Rather than handing the power to, and feeling frustrated with others of, oh, but they're so big. Are they dominating? Well, then switch it off. If you don't like it, don't use it. If you don't want it, don't subscribe. You know, the power is still in our hands. And sometimes I feel that maybe we disempower ourselves through our language and the narrative, even if it's inadvertently, if that helps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I want to go back to the wildlife because you obviously have a deep passion for giving back to wildlife. So can you share with us more about this? And what are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to others looking to pursue a similar career or start their own business?
Okay, so I'm going to split those in 2 if that's helpful.
Sure.
There's the bit about the wildlife. So when we're talking about algorithms, I guess I am part of lots of different Facebook groups. Coming back to the UK, having spent 20 odd years on the road, so to speak, and deploying a lot, meant that I didn't naturally have a hub of humans to come to. I don't naturally have a hub spot, so to speak, not like the company, but as in metaphorically of didn't have a hub to come back to where there were lots of friends and family and that kind of thing. So I use social media actually for me to have community. I'm on the road a lot, love supporting people around the world. And I guess I answered a Facebook ad that said, we're looking for a trainer for an anti-poaching unit. I had no idea that I was going to be supporting a female anti-poaching unit. I'd never worked with women before. People often presume because I'm female, I've worked with lots of women. That's not the case.
Yeah.
So this was a whole learning experience. And then to suddenly find myself in South Africa, where again, I'm used to going into the desert or going up with the orcas or wherever I am and being completely immersed into the environment in which the people or the animals are where I am, residing. And so, literally I ended up going to support a team in South Africa and the Black Mambas, which is the world's first female anti-poaching unit, Black Mamba anti-poaching unit.
Amazing.
And really amazing. They were set up in 2013, so 10 years ago now, and they have completely changed the landscape, not just physically as in where they work down in the Greater Kruger area, but also we've now got female anti-poaching units across Africa, across Asia, mixed male and female units as well being developed, really banishing this idea that it's just a men's world. So I guess I really empathized with that from a team development. So I go to do their resilience and leadership development. From a team perspective, I'd come out of an all-male world or a very male-dominated world, about 10%, I think, or something similar at the time when I joined were female into the army. So I could really empathize with that. All of the other rangers where we were working on the ground in South Africa, all male, all the gunslingers, male, armed response unit, male.
Yes.
Okay. So, that's been an iterative approach again to helping train the members so they can drive vehicles, getting them to be PT instructors, taking them through weapons drills. Now they are unarmed, but you still need to be able to know how to deal with a weapon. And this comes back to that curiosity rather than fear. If you fear something, you'll shrink back. If you're curious to understand what is the threat and the risk from something, you can then work out how you can respond to it that suits you. Whether that is that you take a step back. So when we're taught, for example, militarily wise, about unarmed combat, it's always so that you can disarm the other person so that you can retreat. It's never so that you can attack to kill. Because if you're needing to be, for example, in a counterinsurgency or in a riot situation, central London, it's got protests all the time. Imagine if every police person or, an individual was going in to try and always create more aggression. That doesn't work. You
No.
need to be able to draw back. And from a conservation perspective, that's absolutely, therefore, the mentality I went in with was, this is essentially like counterinsurgency, but for wildlife. You have two different parts of the population base. One wants to protect the wildlife, one wants to kill it and be able to sell it. And so you're therefore doing hearts and minds, training up lots of children around the park so that the next generation understands the ecosystem better, taking grannies. There's got a Bush Grannies program that takes the older matriarchs of the local community, again, into the reserve, so they don't see an elephant as food or as danger. They see an elephant as part of the wider landscape of the
Yes.
ecosystem, that then when the children are coming back from school and then being babysat by the granny, you haven't got this incongruence of school telling you animals are great, granny going, no, they're really dangerous and they're food. Well, you've got this cultural impasse. So you need to create consistency. So again, I guess that's where my military background means I'm not worried about being on the ground. My piece about loving the animal wildlife is I've always been brought up to be in nature. You're usually fighting in beautiful arenas, and that's because people love their country, and that's physically often very beautiful.
Yes.
And therefore it will have the flora and fauna that will go with that landscape, be it the deserts in Iraq, be that the mountains in the Hindu Kush up in Afghanistan, wherever you are, be that up in Norway in that Arctic training region that we use a lot militarily as well. All of these are such beautiful landscapes, and they all have their own ecosystem. So when you're looking at survival, literally survival, how do you get water, how do you get food, what can you eat? The survival training you will do in the military is also then very aligned with helping the ecosystem and the wildlife and the communities survive when you've now got this poaching pandemic, so to speak, of people trying to take the animals and their products for money, and in some places for food. So what the Black Mambas did during COVID, for example, comes about being innovative and looking for solutions rather than fear. They looked at who will be the most vulnerable around the reserve where they work during COVID and what would make them poach. So one reason is to poach for money. Another reason is to poach because you're starving hungry. Those are two very different problem sets. You can go against poachers wanting money by helping create, different ways in which you can raise, to provide jobs, to ensure that, you are doing anti-money laundering work, etc., so that you can't move the money. But if somebody's starving hungry and you're telling them not to go for food, that's a very different scenario. So the Mambas then created basically a list of the between 1995 families around the reserve at any one time that they considered the most vulnerable, and they provided food packages.
Amazing.
They removed the need to go and poach bushmeats by ensuring that families had other income and other food so they could survive. So that, I would say, is one of the reasons I guess I'm passionate about the wildlife, is because I don't just see it as nice fluffy creatures.
No, they might look cute, but they're definitely not.
But they're also a fundamental part of our human ability to survive.
Absolutely.
You look at the wildfires, they would have had rhinos and elephants before. Rhinos eat grass low. They would have been creating fire breaks, which now you have to cut. You would have had large elephants pushing down old trees because they like to eat the roots of some of the marula trees and things. You would have had natural, I want to say interference, but interference in a good way. You would have had a natural ecosystem that was therefore creating resilience against fire and drought and flooding. If you have an open piece of ground, it floods. If you have trees on it, it absorbs. It's got a root structures to go through. And all of the animals that intertwined with basically the difference in all of the organic matter as far as in trees and plants, because they will have pollinators. They'll be the ones eating the fruit and taking the seeds. The real basics of nature that I see is, if I want to be able to have an avocado here and have, be able to have fruit on the side, we need to ensure these ecosystems in the countries where all of those wonderful plants and fruits and vegetables are grown survives.
Yes.
So if I'm being brutally honest, be selfish. I'm going to encourage anyone who listens to this, be ultimately selfish. Look at what you like, look at
Yeah.
what you enjoy. What can you do to ensure you can keep having the things you enjoy?
Mm. And also, there's so much there. I was actually watching a wildlife documentary over the weekend, and I was saying, if only humans would learn from nature, because nature is so phenomenal. I mean, there's nothing wasted, nothing. It's all
Exactly.
recycled back into the earth or whatever the case is, but there's absolutely nothing wasted. So,
Absolutely.
and
And
we
that
should
is
be
why,
going back to growing our own vegetables because obviously our food security is at risk at the minute as well. So I think people have to learn to start going back to basics.
and using less.
Yes,
No, at the end of
exactly.
the day, it's just like we're saying, if every day we can use less than we did tomorrow, does
Mm.
works miracles for the figure, God willing. And it just means you're far more cognizant of, like now I've been in London more, having come back post-COVID, I'm then going, normally if I was at home with my parents, exactly as you described, we'd have literally kind of containers of herbs outside the door and you walk outside the door and it's easy. Here I'm
Yes.
going, right, actually I need to be far more intentional,
Mm.
not buy ready chopped herbs from supermarket X, but go, okay, actually, next time I go home, I need to get some seedlings and bring down pots and now, get pots locally and start actually having this here in London because I now know I'm going to be back here for a while. And I would say be gentle on ourselves too. But
Absolutely.
consider an ecosystem starts at home. What's in your garden? What are you doing to support wherever you are in the world?
Mm.
What are you supporting the insects? Are you putting varieties of flowers out that the bees like? Are
Yes.
you putting pesticides down that are going to kill things? I
Yes.
mean, in which case, if it's going to kill one thing, it's going to kill many.
Yeah.
So how can
Absolutely.
you do little things like people don't like? But anyway, I won't get into too much of the detail, but there are so many innovative ways, like you say, of looking backwards to create, looking back to create visions of the future. Some really simple stuff. I mean, literally like breaking up eggshells because, certain creatures don't like to go over them that are going to eat your plants. That's
Mm.
not hard. You're going to eat an egg anyway. Great. Well, if you're an egg eater, okay, crumple it up and now just put it on top of your plant pots. This isn't
Yes.
hard. But when we're bringing this back into the more, business leadership side is, ironically, it's almost just as simple, is going, right, you're looking for profitability.
Mm.
What could you actually do more efficiently? Where could you source some material that's going to be made more efficiently? Okay, so in which case you're not going to have the wastage, which affects your profit line, which affects your sustainability, etc., etc. So what is good for one is good for many. And
Yes.
that piece is, whilst it might sound a little odd on a leadership podcast talking about small things, but it's because actually if we go with that mindset, it's
Mm.
much easier to scale because you're not seeing
Absolutely.
it as a gargantuan task. You're going, okay, a bit like death by 1,000 cuts. How do I grow by 1,000 moves? And little nudge, 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 Kaizen theory that you have of the nudge theory, moving things forward a little by little by little. And if we
Yes.
follow those, it works.
Absolutely. So that leads me to the two final questions. So, what are the three key pieces of advice you would give to others looking to pursue either a similar career or start their own business? And how would you like to be remembered, or what legacy would you like to leave?
I know that was such a hard question. I've been pondering that for a while. So I think the biggest piece I'd suggest to anyone looking to grow their own business or to start a business is look for where your passion lies.
Yes.
Running a business, running a team takes energy. And the more you can be in flow, the more where you're not forcing curiosity, you are already curious.
Yes.
So, for better or for worse, both of my grandmothers were beekeepers. So naturally, I have already been brought up in an ecosystem of plants and wildlife because of where I came from. That's made it much easier when I'm then
Yes.
trying to understand the next level and the next level. Whereas I didn't come out of a financial background, so to speak, although my family were entrepreneurs and did run their own businesses. But I'm really curious about it because I see it affecting everything. Who has resource wins, basically.
Mm.
So I thought, okay, let's go to the source of power. The source of power often comes with ego, money, or resource, of which can often be money or other physical resource. So I can do the leadership development to help people navigate their ego, running good teams, and therefore they will naturally be using the resource better. So when I was looking at setting up my own business, I thought, what am I naturally intrigued by? Where do I get excited? Where does my energy naturally flow? And where do I see a gap in the market? What is there that I am seeing that others aren't seeing? Now that comes with its own frustrations, because then you're going, can't you all see this?
Yeah.
Go, no. But the flip side of that is you go, brilliant. That means I have something tangible to offer that is different to somebody else, because we're all unique.
Yes.
So there's never going to be two people with the same idea, but there's often a fractionally different way in which we might see it. So I'd say, where is your passion? Because where the passion flows, the energy flows.
Yes.
Where the energy flows, productivity, and therefore profitability will flow. And where profitability flows, you get more resource, which gives you more ability to make great, strong, resilient decisions, which includes you intentionally and actively deciding to look at this with an infinite mindset. So maybe I'll be cheeky and add in a fourth.
Yeah,
So
you're more than welcome.
So maybe this could be my legacy, is once you're then looking at sustainable, and when I mean sustainable, I mean, I look at something like the businesses that are still going 100, 120 years time and longer, is my invitation to you, and I hope the legacy of what I can encourage people to do, is seek to view the world through an infinite mindset. Don't look at just what are we going to bring for today, what are we creating for tomorrow?
Yes.
And that might sound slightly kind of fluffy, but it's literally is going, right, what am I producing for tomorrow? You think of things like the amazing ways in which we can now store energy, in which we can transit energy, in which we can grow phenomenal food. We can look after each other, the medications we have, the ways in which we communicate, understanding human behavior. Whatever your sphere of passion is, there is space for it.
Yes, absolutely.
So follow your passion, follow the energy, which will create better productivity, which enables you to make better decisions, and then approach everything with an infinite mindset. Is what I'm doing creating better good for tomorrow? Is this leading towards where we can use less and live, basically live far more harmoniously? So if any business makes choices now that ensures that when we're 100 years time, we've got far, far better ways of living and integrating and working with all species, be it on this planet and the other ones that no doubt we will be integrating with by then, is that we take the good lessons forward. We don't take the shoddy ones forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alice. This has been amazing. So if people wish to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Okay, so come and look for the lion, like the lovely lion behind me.
Yes, love it.
So LinkedIn, and this is from the Mambas, bless them, because of always being out with the lions and a position of strength, I guess. So LinkedIn, Alice Bromage on LinkedIn, you'll see I use the lion a lot. There's a gazillion different blonde females on the planet, whereas not everybody has their lion as their logo. Facebook group, Luminary Leaders, come and join us on there. But mainly, and we are on all of the other platforms too, and Empowering Success. So www.empowering-success.co.uk, and always open to supporting business owners, leaders. We're stronger together. And if there's anything I can do to support you, just direct message me, come onto LinkedIn. Literally, if we can support you, be it as a business owner, somebody who's looking at exploring where do I go into, running a large corporation, literally we do the whole spectrum, because for me, the power comes from within. And if we can change one person's viewpoint, you can scale that. And it doesn't matter what size business you are, running thousands of people or running one, you can still make a difference. So we're here to support wherever we can. So look for the lion, LinkedIn, Alice Bromage, www.empowering-success.co.uk. And then, just pop up on Google, come and find me. We'd love to connect.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are.
Would love that. And thank you for your time in inviting me. So hopefully some useful takeaways and practical ones for people, not just lots of conjecture.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant.